One of the most brutal prisons found inside of London was Newgate Prison. It was built in the 12th century around the year 1188 and was closed in the 20th century in 1902. Today the criminal courtrooms that were attached to the site make up the Old Bailey, the famous criminal courts in London. But in the late 1700s there was a shift in the executions in London, as public hangings were moved from Tyburn and the triangular gallows there to Newgate Prison. But what was life like inside of this prison? Join us today as we look at the notorious prison that executed hundreds. And remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. The first part of Newgate Prison was built in the 12th century. Then in the following decades steps were made to enlarge the site, and these additions included new dungeons and other buildings. By the 1400s, Newgate was in need of more expansion and repair, and it was said that the women's quarters were too small and did not even have toilets, meaning that women had to walk through the men's prison to find a toilet. The building was also collapsing in places, and many prisoners who were housed in Newgate were actually dying from the conditions there. There was a severe problem with overcrowding and also disease, as it ran rampant throughout the unsanitary conditions. 22 prisoners in 1 year died from jail fever, and the prison in 1419 was shut down because of the dire conditions. Renovations took place in 1422, with the gatehouse and the jail being rebuilt. In this new prison there was a main hall for mealtime, a new chapel and also more cells, and a few that had no light or ventilation for the most serious offenders. There were 3 main wards, one for those who could pay their own food and accommodation, a common side for the poor people, and another ward for special prisoners. The rulers at the time would use Newgate as a place to house traitors, serious criminals, heretics and also rebels, and it could hold around 300 people. But during the Great Fire of London in 1666, the prison caught fire and was destroyed, and it was later rebuilt by Christopher Wren. Parliament then in 1770 would enlarge the site again and add a new courtroom, spending almost in today's money around £10 million on Newgate. Another fire gutted the building, causing millions of pounds of repair in 1780, before prison reformers began to express more concern about the conditions. Elizabeth Fry in particular was distressed by the cells that were housing women and also their children, and her call for reform did improve things before Newgate closed in 1902. But as mentioned, Newgate held many different prisoners, from those guilty of petty crime to serious criminals who committed murder, who would be held there before their execution took place. When prisoners arrived there, they were chained and led into their dungeon, and those who were sentenced to death were kept inside a cellar found beneath the keeper's house. This was practically an open sewer, which had chains and shackles lined along it, where prisoners could be held. The dungeons were so bad in these quarters that doctors would refuse to go in. Some prisoners who could afford alcohol spent their time mostly drunk, and there was lice everywhere, in which caused problems with disease. Many people each year were killed by the conditions, and some jailers were bribed to give prisoners more food, better bedding, or even to be released from their shackles. To earn more money, some jailers would also torture prisoners. It was not the most secure prison, as some people did escape. Burglar Jack Sheppard escaped twice, before he was later executed at the gallows at Tyburn in 1724. But Newgate became the site of London's gallows in 1783. For centuries many people had been killed at the infamous triangular gallows at Tyburn, but then the site of the gallows was changed to Newgate. The crowds would flock to Newgate to witness public hangings, which occurred on platforms outside the prison walls. It was London's main prison and continued to attract large crowds for executions. Some people could even visit the condemned in prison if they had a permit from the Lord Mayor of London. At the time of the shift, the condemned were kept in small and narrow cells, separated by a thick wall, and they only had dim light from an inner courtyard. The gallows had been made outside a door in Newgate Street, and the platform here allowed for thousands to see from a distance away. Huge crowds of thousands of people would line the streets to see the executions, and the crowds were so big at one execution in 1807 that there was a huge human crush, and many died from this. As things shifted throughout England with regards to public executions, there was a call to give some dignity to the condemned. Because of this, from 1868, executions were moved inside the walls of the prison on a gallows inside of Newgate Prison. They used, to begin with, the same mobile gallows inside the chapel yard, and later were put in a shed built closely inside the walls. The gallows were found near a stone passageway referred to as Dead Man's Walk, and the condemned criminals would be taken onto the gallows and then executed before they were buried beneath the flagstones of the prison. Their initials would be engraved on a stone wall above. Many executioners were trained at Newgate before they took the lives of other people around England. In total, 1,169 people were executed at Newgate Prison during its time in operation. The last man to be hanged in public outside Newgate was Michael Barrett in May 1868, and George Wolfe was the last hanged in Newgate's shed on the 6th of May 1902. Throughout the centuries, there were many famous prisoners housed in Newgate Prison, including Oscar Wilde, William Penn, John Rogers and Catherine Murphy. But it was one of the toughest and most brutal places of incarceration inside of London, with the conditions being very difficult inside. Newgate became a site of mass execution, and the crowds would flock to the site to witness executions, even up until the day when the final one took place outside the prison's walls. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.